Hi, I'm Amy Johnson. I'm here with my friend Wendi Saggese, and we're just gonna have a little talk. I make a lot of little videos like this. I know Wendi makes some, and we both share this understanding of the three principles. And Wendi and I have kind of been in touch, kind of known of each other, I think, for a few years now. But more recently started talking a little bit more, and I really wanted to share her with those of you who watch some of my videos regularly because, and what I write about and talk about, I rave about this understanding of life, which I know sounds a little vague until you've been kind of around it for a while. And I use big words that sometimes even make me question, like, this is the truth and this is life-changing. And it certainly has been for me and for a lot of people. When I heard Wendi's story, and I saw her recently at a conference in London and heard a little bit about just how life-changing this has been for her, it was so inspiring, and it really just made me think, man, I wish everyone could hear that, because, I don't know, it's just such a wonderful, true life story and example of just the power of this understanding. So I asked her to join me for this very casual chat we're going to have, and we're just going to talk and see where it goes. We don't have anything planned, so we'll just kind of see where it goes. So thank you, Wendi, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Wendi is a teacher of this understanding as well, like I am, and is working with people. So toward the end or somewhere around this video, I can share her contact information too, because she's a great source of more of this. So maybe, if it's okay with you, just sort of like really briefly, say a little, I know this is not really a brief question, but say a little bit about kind of how things have changed for you. So, you spoke at the conference in London about sort of how life was sort of a long time, like a lot of us, me included, of searching and struggling and kind of knowing it shouldn't quite be this hard, but it felt really hard and all of that kind of stuff. And then in the past few years, some of the challenges that you've been up against, and just how what you've seen from this understanding has changed things for you.
Okay, happy to talk about that. Let's see, where do we start? Well, like Amy said, I have been, I guess you could call it a seeker for a long time. I always felt I didn't really feel happy with who I was. And I always felt there was some answer outside of me about who I was. So from when I was 16, my mom dragged me to an ashram, to this like kind of encounter group. Then I did some other things, questioning yourself. I did option and Byron Katie and NLP, and the list goes very long. And yeah, through some of those techniques, I had felt a lot of peace. I did meditation and I felt peace, but nothing that really changed me. Like my last, I would say, close to 4 years understanding and learning about the principles. And the principles, it's called the three principles of Sydney Banks. I think your people might know that by now. And it's just these simple truths about the way we work. And it just makes everything different. It's so simple that it's easy to pass up. So for instance, my husband picked up Sydney Banks' book 30 years ago. And when he first found out about the principles, he thought, wow, that sounds really familiar. And he remembered it, but it just didn't hit him because it seemed too simple. And I find that so cool that it's that simple. But first, you have to get over this stumbling block of thinking you know what the principles are even about. And what happens, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, right before we started, we were talking about how people they're holding on for dear life to these concepts that they have about life, that they think it's a life preserver, and they think, oh my gosh, like a concept like that's found in The Secret, like you create your own reality, or affirmations that if you only affirm enough, then you'll be okay, or these things that people hold on to. And they are afraid that if they let go, they're going to drown. Now, this is what the principles has to offer. If you just put your feet up and lay back, you float. You don't even need the life preserver. So what I mean by that is recently had a client that she was all for all of this understanding. And she even had cancer and can see this understanding a little bit in cancer. And she was all for learning it. She was about 2 sessions in. And I mentioned something that she had mentioned a few weeks prior about her mother-in-law. And I said, with this understanding, you can even get to the point of feeling okay about this relationship you have. And she looked at me and she was so angry. And she said to me, if this means getting rid of this, me forgiving my mother-in-law, forget it, I'm out. And I got, oh, wow, okay. I guess I said the wrong thing. And when I settled down and I wasn't self-conscious about maybe bringing up the mother-in-law out of context, I realized, wow, I understand that. And the way I understand it is maybe she allowed her mother-in-law for a number of years to what she considered not being nice to her or abusing her or stepping on her a bit. And now she had this new experience of like, she could be angry. And that's a little bit of a step above of letting somebody step on you. So she's holding on to that anger because she doesn't want to get stepped on. But she doesn't realize that there's even 3 layers up of this freedom where you don't even have to be angry. You don't even have to hold on to concepts about the way life works. And the freedom in that is brings you a lot more joy in your life. I'm not sure if anything is what I said is hitting anything. So let me hear.
Yeah. No, it really is. It reminds me, I've heard it twice this week of like people with, she has anger toward her mother-in-law. Like I work with a lot of people that are caught up in habits, eating disorders, for example. And it drives that. It seems like it would just be a purely bad thing, right? It's painful. It's not good. It's not helpful. It's not healthy, but there's almost like a push or pull in there where people get to the point where they ask for help, they want help, but they always, not always, but at least twice this week and regularly, they'll follow that up with, I'm so scared to leave this behind, but I know I have to. I really want recovery, but I'm terrified of it. And it's almost like, it just reminded me of that with her. It's like, you can't always see it, but how can we not know that peace is possible with another person? But she's kind of so in that anger, and that anger is relatively good, maybe compared to where she was, that it's like the peace is like invisible, and I think that's how it is. I think it's just very similar with habits and addictions and things like that. It's like, well, this is not good, and our wisdom tells us that. We know that, but there's such a familiarity there, and we don't really know what's possible, the freedom that's possible. So with eating disorder people, for example, they might think, oh, well, I can probably get rid of this eating disorder, but I might gain a bunch of weight, or I don't know, I don't know, my life's going to change. Like, they don't get that it can be complete freedom, that you can be like a little kid again, where you just don't think about what you eat, and you think about other things in your life that are much more important than food. That's so foreign in a certain mind space, that's so foreign to them that it almost feels compelling, I think, to hold on to what they know. So I think that sounds like, I don't know if that's similar, but it sounds like kind of what you're speaking to in terms of the simplicity and the freedom of being able to just kick back and float that is possible for every human on earth, that we don't really get. I think sometimes we don't get that that's possible, and that kind of holds us back.
Yeah, I think that's the exact same thing. In the moment that, so like you were going to introduce me a little bit more, and I think a lot of people know that I have stage 4 cancer. And I don't really have to go into that story at that point. You can look on my website if you want to know more, or ask me. But I do have stage 4 cancer. Now, I used to wake up in the middle of the night freaking out. Oh my God, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. In the middle, okay, 2 a.m. I'm thinking, oh my God, should I do the traditional thing? Should I do that thing? This person, that, I need to. So like I have this idea when I'm spinning in this web of thought that I need to figure it out now in order to fall asleep now. But there's no answers now anyway. And when I started seeing this understanding that it's just a simple thing, that it's so simple that you just get caught up in thinking, and thinking is very compelling and very real in the moment you're caught up in thinking. And I've been telling people lately, this understanding is as simple as when your friend says, hey, don't write that email, sleep on it. Because when you're about to write the email, you're caught up in this web of thought that seems, at the moment, it seems so true. And it's so compelling to want to figure it out right then because you feel so awful. It's like, it's scary, cancer. It's scary that I don't know what I'm going to do next. But what I started to realize is that there's no answers right here, right now. And in this moment, without even having those answers, I could relax and go back to sleep and trust that in the morning, when I've slept on it and I feel a little better, I could see a little clearer. It's just a misunderstanding all the time. Like that client of mine and yours, in the moment, it was just a misunderstanding that if she lets go of her anger, that she then might do something different. When I was first exposed to the principles, I had gone to a psychiatrist accidentally, that somebody told me about it, and he stopped doing every practice that he did except the principles. And I went in there thinking about my upset about cancer. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but I knew it had to do with that we're living in the feeling of our thinking. And I remember I got so quiet that I was just like a little newborn baby looking around at things. And I didn't even have words in my mind. It was just such this beautiful peace and quiet. From that peace and quiet, I could decide what I'm going to do about cancer. I could also know whether how I want to react to my mother-in-law. It doesn't mean I'm going to lay down and let her step on me. It just means that I have more access to just different answers from this peaceful place. You know, it's almost like what I just read about. I can't remember one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King. It's just, there's no answers in more violence. There's no answers in me freaking out. And there's this thing called our intellect, which is so beautiful and gives us so much, but not every answer is found in our intellect. And when we start spinning off in the intellect, we're kind of not letting the room for this natural, beautiful intellect that's way bigger than just this thinking, you know?
Yeah.
And it's all innocent. It's all innocent, like how we don't listen to that. How I in the middle of the night wake up, how my client thinks she has to be angry, how your clients think they have to have a technique to stop eating or whatever it is. Yeah. And it's so innocent that I sometimes still get caught up in it. I mean, I often, like, if I get a new diagnosis or something, for the first couple of days, I often am like freaking out. I think my thinking's right. I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this. And I need to figure it out. And there's only suffering there. I don't see it in the moment. And then when I just kind of relax and let it take care of itself, I wait and the suffering sort of drops to the side. And then I can have a little bit more peace in my next decision.
Yeah. That place of just relative quiet, even, you know, I mean, like when you saw that therapist, I mean, that was sounds like a major quiet experience. But even just like they say in principles a lot, a little bit goes a long way. You know, it's like when your mind just quiets even a little bit, suddenly it is weird to talk about, but it's like ideas pop into your head and things kind of pop out of the woodwork that have always been there, but we couldn't see them when we were spinning up here. And then you get a little more quiet and even more things show up, you know? And even when things aren't showing up, it's not a strategy. It's not like get quiet so you can get an answer. It's like get quiet and you'll be okay. If there's an answer, you'll get it. If there's not, still not, you'll be okay in that. You know, it's just such a such a feeling of, I don't know, okayness in that moment that is so different from where most of us live. All of us probably live most of our lives more in our intellect, like you're saying, and in our thinking. But I think that's one thing that I think this understanding does so awesome for people. It's just give you the feel of that difference. Does that make sense? Is that kind of your experience?
It makes sense, and I have a great example of it. And it was while I was reading your book, which I love, by the way, the little book of Big Change. I love everything about it. I love the feel of it. It's nice and small. It just fits in my purse. I just love that book. And I was reading the book, so I love that you reminded me that everything's just a thought in the moment and a habit of something you've always done. So I was in the middle. Have you heard me tell this story before? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, I was in the middle of driving my kid to a baseball practice, and it was about an hour away in traffic from my house, and reading that book. And not at the moment, I was driving. Trust me, I wasn't. So I was reading that book, and it really was keeping me in this conversation in my head about habits and about thoughts. And he forgot his cleats, and we were an hour away. And, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You forgot your cleats, and we're in this traffic, and you're not going to be able to go to the practice. And I was very settled, where I would have screamed at him in the past. He's 14. He can use a little screaming now and then. But I was very settled, purposely settled. I wasn't in this beautiful space or anything, but I kind of just was calm about it. And I looked at him and I said, well, let's see what we're going to do. So I just stayed settled, and I didn't even make a decision because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether we should go to the practice, make him wear my sneakers, or go to a store, or just turn around and go home. So I settled down and I said, well, you could wear my sneakers. And he got really upset about that. And I said, okay, let's scratch that. Because, maybe a 14-year-old boy doesn't want to wear his mom's sneakers, even though they look the same as his sneakers. But So I drove into the parking lot of where might be a sports store. And then a minute later, I knew what to do. It was go home. There's no sports stores. There's no reason. Just go home. Doing that, I felt like I wanted to sort of wring his neck like Homer Simpson does and say, how could you forget your sneakers? I don't believe you forgot your sneakers. Why would you do that? Can't you be responsible? I can't believe you're 14 years old. So that's all that's running in my mind. But I just was reading your book, and I was reminded to shut up. Just don't say anything. And then I remember having this self-conversation while we're driving home, but it feels really bad. I feel this need to scream at him. Is that feeling going to go away? And I said, well, Wendy, you teach the 3 principles. You might as well just see if it's true that it'll go away. Just leave it alone. Don't say anything and let the feelings stir. And in that moment, when the feelings felt really strong in me, in that moment, I really didn't honestly think they'd go away, but I knew better than to open my big mouth and say anything. And I'd say about 3 minutes later, the feelings were gone. And I just oh, that's a miracle. It was just a miracle to me. And then I looked at the kid and I'm like, there's nothing to say. I don't even he knows he forgot his cleats. Right. Nothing to say right now is going to help. And I felt good. I felt beautiful. I was like, wow, the feeling really in the moment really did go away. But that wanting to do the original habit, that's where we sometimes just stay. We do the habit, and then that's okay too, because then we learn the next time. But that's the habit is, it's like you're holding on to this life vest that really wasn't serving you.
Yeah. I love that. It's so cool to have those experiences where you feel that little pull, whether it's a behavior, like people who have other addictions and stuff, or a behavior of yelling at your kid, or even just getting more emotional about it. You could have just went on in your head about it and been upset the whole drive home, but it was like that little pull's there, and then it's like, no, that's not what I'm going to do right now. And you just let it do what it does. And it does go away a lot of times. That's awesome. such a feeling of freedom. And it's so like, okay, well then anything that comes my way, I can handle it. Because it's all that, right? Like that's why one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you so much, because I hear people all the time say, oh, I get it, but this is going on with my husband, or this is, but you don't get it because this, I have physical pain, I have a chronic physical pain condition, or it doesn't help with this, you know. And I just think you're such a great example of that, of someone that has seen this, the stage 4 cancer with life, like just a normal person with so much going on, that it's like there aren't any exceptions. So that story you told is something that maybe everyone has experienced in their own little way, but nothing is any different from that, really. Does that make sense? It's like it's all, everything we feel is a thought that arises that has a feeling to it, and then it changes and does whatever it does. Whether that thought is about wanting to get mad that your kid forgot his cleats, or about getting divorced or something bigger in life. It's still that one simple thing. It's a thought that arises from within us that we feel.
Yeah, it's always that. And different flavors of it. So sometimes I'll have a client and they'll be talking about, but you know, I'm different because I had this horrible background or somebody beat me. And sometimes I'll just shock them and say, well, guess what? I have stage 4 cancer and I know I'm not different. I mean, even though I got to preface it with that there are times when I'm in my thinking and I don't, wait, let me even preface that. There are times when I get wound up in my upset about having cancer. Where in that moment, if you tapped me and said, oh, Wendi, you're just thinking, yeah, I'd probably get mad at you, because in the moment, it's like you're in this great movie and you're scared and you're scared. And if somebody just tapped you, you jump, you know, because it's very real. That's just the way life is. Our thinking is real when we're thinking. And that's just being human. Like that's just part of being human. But I know I've learned from the principles that even with cancer, even with, if I'm on my deathbed at some point, if I'm upset about that, I still know that it's my thinking in the moment that's upsetting me. Yeah. And there's a lot of freedom in that. There's a lot of freedom in looking in that direction with whatever comes up for you. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't still get caught up. I've had recent scans and recent scares, and I get caught up in it, but I still have so much freedom in understanding that it's my thinking in the moment, at any moment. And that, Amy, it's changed my relationships. Like, it's made me so different that I don't have to have my husband behave a certain way in order for me to feel okay about our relationship. And in fact, sometimes my husband is harsher than a lot of people. And I'm like, you know, I might go to being mad at him or whatever I feel, but I still have this little tiny glimpse of understanding that it's not him that's upsetting me. It's my thinking about what he's doing. So what I do remember at that conference in London is I stood up and I remember saying 3 or 4 times that I finally see there's nothing wrong with me. Now, not everybody walks around in life like I did thinking something was wrong with me, you or them. Some people have a lot of confidence and some people put on a good show. But inside, I always felt like there's something that needed to change. There's some technique I needed to learn to have peace and happiness and be in love. Like those concepts you hear through the years, love yourself. Like, well, how do you do that? And with the principles, it's so cool is you don't even have to do that. All you have to do is take away all this running commentary about life. And when you take that away, like my first experience with that psychiatrist, when that went away, I was in love with myself. it just is. It was always there. I didn't know it was always there because I was so busy looking for life preservers of how to techniqueize myself to be different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that is huge. That for me, that's what I talk about a lot too, is kind of first hearing that we're always healthy, always perfect. Everything is fine. We just think over it. Because I thought for years it was the opposite. I knew I was born healthy and fine, but then I thought I had been kind of slowly damaged over the years. And there's like no way of believing that. If anybody believes that about themselves, you're gonna be looking for something out there. Like you can't not. I think our health is so strong, our desire to feel at home and just to feel healthy and all of that, to feel like ourselves is so strong that we're all doing everything we do in life. Every moment of our lives is something we do because we think it's going to get us closer to home, because it's going to feel good in some way. So it's like if someone truly believes, and I think a lot of people do, unfortunately, that you're damaged, you're maybe fixable. There's a technique you can find, go to the right people, and maybe you'll get it someday. But until then, you're kind of in trouble. Like, you're never going to stop searching. And the search hurts. The search is painful. And the search keeps, taking you out, focused out in the wrong direction. So it sounds like that was a huge thing for you too, is just to see, wait a minute, this is me, that good feeling, that quietness, that's always been there. And I love how you said that. Just all I need to do is just stop listening to all the garbage that's in the way. It's like the TV works, but there's just a lot of static there. If you can flip to a channel where there's no static, well, you have a fine, clear picture. Everything's fine. We're just so tuned into the static, I think, and innocently in our misunderstanding, we don't realize that it is just static. It's just kind of what we've learned and how our mind works.
Yeah. And in the moment, it seems so compelling too, to I'm always telling people this 45-ish thoughts a minute, and you pick one, and it sounds like the one you've been running, and it makes sense. And so you get feeling bad about it because you're sure it's true, but if you didn't hang on to it, if you didn't engage in it, if you didn't try to fix it, if you just understood that it just goes along its merry way, and then the next minute you're okay. But what I did all those years, and I struggled a lot with depression. I think what I see now in depression is it's like you have this thought, like Wendi needs self-esteem, there's something wrong with her. And then you go and you try to fix it, and you try to engage it. And then you, as if it was solid cement and real, but you're trying to fix it, makes it solid cement and real. And that's even compelling to me to this day when I have I had about a month ago, I went to this party with people that I was a little more friendly with prior to my involvement in the three principles understanding. And I felt all those insecure feelings. I just looked around and I said, oh my God, she's working more than me. Their kid is better. This is better. And I had all that going on. And I thought, Wendi, what is wrong with you? Did you learn nothing? I guess the three principles are just stupid. And then the next day, everything, I didn't try to fix it. That's the one credit I had while I was in that very compelling thinking. Didn't try to fix it. And the next day I woke up and I was like, oh, I don't feel quite as bad. And then the next thought I had was, oh my gosh, I spent a night where I used to live. I always felt that way. Wow, that is huge amount of progress.
Yeah.
I always felt that way. That's the way I walked around day in and day out. And I just had a little taste of it so I could see where I was almost. And I thought, wow. So if you just know nothing else about the three principles, and you just know when you're stuck in thinking things that are making you feel bad, if you just don't do anything about it, don't try to fix it, just stay out of the way. It's just like that email your friend tells you, don't write it today, sleep on it. Yeah. You sleep on it, and the next day, you could see a little bit of sunshine cracking up through the clouds. It's like when you're dug in it. I always tell people, like, when you're in the bottom of a ditch, you can only see the walls of the ditch around you. And when you step up, you start to see the sunrise around you, you know? And you just can't see it when you can't see it, and there's no fighting it. I'm finally this year really understanding that for my own personal experience of life. Just, oh, well, just leave it alone. He's mad, leave him alone. My kid's upset, leave him alone. I'm upset, leave it alone. And it's this miracle that continues to grow, that you just start being okay the next day, or being okay a few hours later, a few minutes later. Like that happened to me on the freeway with the cleats. Mm-hmm. But it never ceases to amaze me, because me personally, I really believe my thinking when I'm in my thinking. I'm not one of those people that just thinks a little. I'm like big drama. Get into it. Right now you have no self-esteem, you suck, and everything's terrible. Yeah. And I really buy it hook, line, and sinker, and then I just don't do so much about it, and then it's gone.
That's such a common kind of question people have about how that goes once you see this, you know. So I love that you're speaking to that in terms of just, you get this is sucked in, it sounds like, as you always did, but maybe part of the difference, tell me if this sounds right, but maybe part of the difference really is just that by some grace of this understanding, you just do less about it. Is that how it feels? Or?
Yeah, and what I've evolved to, I remember Linda Pransky said to me in one of my sessions with her, she said, there's no difference between you and I. We have the same frailties, or maybe not exactly the same, but we both have frailties. It's just, I don't care that I have frailties. I don't care that I get sucked into my thinking from now. That's what I heard, is I don't really care that I get sucked into my frailties now and again, or my thinking. And that was maybe a year or 2 years, maybe a year ago when I did that session. And now I see that as well. It's like, oh, you feel like crap, so what? You know, I finally see that that's part of being human. It's not looking to never, ever feel bad again. I had a lot on that. Once you're spiritually enlightened, you'll just walk around and float through life, and that's really doesn't include being human. And now I get this understanding in a different way, where that's all weather, that's all being human. And one of the ways to explain it that's super simple is that when we get a cut, you might want to pick at the cut or something, but the body has this natural way of pulling the skin together and closing the wound. If we poke at that wound, we're going to just open it up, and we're not going to help nature. Well, nature, so far with my life, has had a way of showing me, you don't have to say anything. Eventually, you'll feel that peaceful feeling again with the cleats. I have some pretty, my husband will occasionally say something mean out of his vision of the world. I don't have to say anything to him. I could leave it alone till I settle down, till he settles down. Yeah. And then sometimes I don't have to say anything at all, ever. It's like those were fuel for fire. Like if my husband said the wrong thing and I got upset, I would have to, at least in the next few days. Well, first I learned, without the principles, that it's probably better if I don't address it while he's in the heat of anger. So I learned that just by being married. Mm-hmm. And then from the really more understanding of the principles, I learned that when you just leave it alone, sometimes it just disappears. It was never really an issue to begin with. So even if he says mean things to me and I say mean things to him, we don't have to go back and dig into the pit of mud. Like, I have another recent thing that happened, if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
An old girlfriend of mine made contact with me. And about a year ago, she made contact with me, and she said some things that I didn't like. And so I just thought, I don't really want to be in this relationship. Well, recently, I'm even more calm than I was a year ago. She again approached me to engage some more, and I said, "Oh, all right." And then I said, "You know, the way I see relationships is yeah, we'll talk today, and then we'll see what happens." And then she wrote me this long email about how this is how she likes to have relationships, and we've had so much done in the past, and she doesn't see it like that, and she wants to know that the relationship's going to be like this. Very long, very long, and it felt really heavy to me.
Yeah.
And for a few minutes, I thought, wow, I've got to address that. I don't want to hurt her feelings, but that feels so yucky. And I need to address these little things that she said. And then I was trying to figure out, how do I address this long email she wrote me? And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. There's nothing in there for me. And I wrote her this email back. I said, this is the way I see it. If we have a conversation and I like it and you like it, one of us will call each other. And these are the things that I've been studying lately, the 3 principles, and let me know if you'd like to hear about them. Like all that, like she had so much mud, which the mud was just like a big pile of mud. And it was just her thinking all these things about how relationships are supposed to be and having all these concepts, and you have to love each other and you have to do all this and that. And did I want to walk over into that mud and play with her in the mud? I thought I had to for a second, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't even have to play in that mud. This is where I'm at. You know, if we like each other today, we'll call each other. And that was as far as I had to go. And that was such a big aha moment for me too, because like we told my son the other day after baseball, he had 2 errors, which at the shortstop, you shouldn't really have errors because then everybody kind of gets mad at you. And he said, well, he got in the car and he said, well, I shouldn't make those errors. And I think next time I could do that. And then my husband and I simultaneously had enough insight in the moment to say, you know, there's no answers in the errors. Just leave it alone. Let it go. And then just move on to tomorrow. You know, being as present as you can when the ball comes to you. There's no answer in my friend's mud. There's no answer in the fight that I'm going to go and explain to my husband how he should never say those kind of things to me and blah, blah, blah. It's compelling to think you got to go in and dig in there, but there's really no answers there. That took me a while to understand, and I still don't always understand it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's
no so when you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, which treatment am I going to do? What's going to happen? There's no answers in that moment. From that feeling, there aren't answers.
From that, yeah, that's the key, right? From that feeling, there aren't answers.
Yeah.
And I've had so many things. Recently, my husband said something to me and it was really mean. And I actually revealed to one of my clients what it was he said. And then afterwards, I said something about how I love my husband more than ever. And she said, really? And he said that to you? And I said, yeah, don't you see? He was just in his thinking in the moment. And he was like acting out of that fear or that thought that it's usually that I'm spending too much money. So it's like he's over there and I tell him about some more money I'm going to spend. And it's like I poke him in his money pimple. And then the pimple kind of spews out some stuff. Right. But during that conversation, he didn't see his wife just talking to him. He just saw his own personal thinking about money, and I poked it, you know? So he said a bunch of stuff. None of it even had anything to do with me. So there was never any fixing. That doesn't mean I didn't later go back and kid him and say, I can't believe you said such a thing. What kind of thing is that to say? And, you know, kind of, but it wasn't this huge month-long, oh my God, I need a divorce thinking that I used to do.
Right. That sounds so obvious when you say it, but it's so profound, really. I mean, seriously, I think, especially in relation and everything, but how often, I know every single person listening has had something said to them by another person where it looks like either it totally was about them, so they just genuinely feel offended and it lingers and they hold on to it, or like your client with the mother-in-law, they think they should be offended. So they keep it alive because, like, you're not going to talk to me that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so much in that. And just to see, I mean, that little tiny thing right there alone can change people's lives. To see that when someone, what people do, what people say, especially from high emotion, especially when you're poking their sore spot, you know, they're not talking to you. They're not even talking reason. They're just spewing hurt and fear and whatever cloudiness. They're in their mud, right? And they're just throwing mud around. But we take it so personally, especially when it's mud, which is so ironic. You know, that's the misunderstanding. That's the time we want to take them less personally. We want to get, okay, no, I see what you're going through and it's not about me, but we don't. Just not because we can't, no one's taught us this.
Well, as you do what you said in your book, like with the cleats, how one of my clients, we'd walk on the beach and her famous last words, and she wanted to get a t-shirt that said this, and it was "shut the F word up." So with the cleats and the kid, I just, I still felt it and wanted to yell at him, but I just didn't say anything. And that innate health came through.
Yeah.
And when you, even if you don't see at the moment that my husband should not be saying these mean things to me, even if I really have a lot on it, if I just stop for a minute and I don't, and I could watch it all, I could see that in every moment, everybody's just living in this, I always call it lately, I don't know how to say it, but it's like a capsule of their own head of thinking. And it has so little to do with you. One of my favorite things I recently did was I was on a cancer site, and it wasn't 3 principles, it was just people with cancer. And the conversation started going to what people have said to you when you've told them they had cancer. And so I asked everybody, can you just give me a sentence or two of the worst things people have told you? And I found it quite comical, because what happens when you have cancer is people say some really yucky things. So here's what some of the girls said. One girl said, well, her best friend or close friend said to her, when she said she had cancer, said, well, at least you could get a free boob job. And another girl was about to get married and she had cancer. And another girl said to her, well, at least your husband's not going to leave you. He's still going to marry you. Somebody said to me that, quoting from The Secret, how I created my own cancer, which, that's not really a helpful thing to say. So the first girl, at least you get a free boob job. Well, that's her close friend that said that. Inside that person, when I say to you, I have cancer, you have all these thoughts about cancer. So that person doesn't even see me suffering with cancer, afraid. That person sees only their own thoughts about cancer because it's so scary to them, usually.
Yeah.
That's the first person with the boob job. The second person, that's obviously what she'd be scared of if she had cancer, that her boyfriend would leave. I forgot what the third example was. That third example of the person talking about how you create your own cancer, well, she's living her life. That's her life preserver that says, I'll never create this. Oh my God, I can't do this. Well, what I pointed out to the women in the group, it's so funny that people would even say that. Can't you see that they're just so in their own world, they don't even see you, their best friend, suffering? They can't be present to their own thinking and to you at the same time. And so you shouldn't, I spoke to how you don't really have to have hurt feelings about that. That's just their own knee-jerk response to you saying that. One woman told me a story about how her sister-in-law died and then the husband was so relieved. Well, I have cancer. I don't want to know that my husband's going to be relieved when I die. Like, that's just not the best thing to tell me. It could really help me go spinning off into my thinking. And it was so clear to me how this is a super supportive woman that loves me. And she would never say anything to hurt me. It's just at every moment, it's just like you say cancer, and we get all these visions in our head of what that means and how we fought it in our lives, or who died for. That's the other thing people do. They tell you the long story about how their mother died or their sister died from cancer, and you're like, what? Really? Do you really? So just that was just such a nice example for me of freedom, because I don't have to be upset by what people say about cancer, because really they're just innocently stuck in their own thinking. They don't in that moment see me. Now I'm available to act differently when I get a comment like that. Like, I'm available to not be hurt and know that they're just in their fearful thinking. I'm available to not be hurt when I bring up money to my husband, because money or anything is just our thinking. Any upset is our thinking. But in the moment that my particular husband, and many husbands, are thinking about money, it's not a thought to them. It's very, very real. And like I said, it's just that I poked him in his pimple. He doesn't even see me just innocently standing there, just mentioning money.
Yeah. You know, and part of there's a freedom too, I think, that comes. So that's so, again, so simple and obvious in some ways, but also just so profound, like that people see, they're just seeing through their little capsule or whatever, you know, and that it gives you compassion for them almost. It certainly helps you to not take it personally. But, you know, even when, I think there's another piece to that almost too, which is like you feel a new freedom now that you've seen that when you get caught up, someone says something that gets your mind spinning, whether they said it innocently or, you know, even if they're trying to hurt you or whatever, like it's the words are out there, it gets your mind spinning. You've also seen that you're not a victim to that your mind's going to spin because minds spin. Duh, you're a human being, but your mind's also going to stop spinning. And they don't have to take it back and apologize and fix it. And you don't have to do some crazy thing to like clear your mind. You know what I mean? Like you're saying earlier, it's like worst case, you take their thoughts and it does create some upset in you. Well, that's temporary.
I love that you said you're not a victim, because that's generally how since understanding, and the more I understand, you're not a victim. I'm not a victim to him, my husband, in the moment of his thinking. I'm not a victim to cancer. Now, I felt like before the principles, I was a complete victim to cancer. Oh, here's one more. I'm not a victim to my thinking in the moment. I mean, in the moment when I'm freaking out about whatever, I'm not even a victim to that, because it's just a transient. I thought I was a victim all the time. Most of the percentage of the time walking this earth, I felt like a victim to my childhood, my lack of self-esteem, just my husband, my depression. I have depression. It didn't seem like other people were depressed as much as I was. I'm not a victim to any of it. It just is in the moment, and it's not. It's just weather. And just my words saying doesn't really convey it, because what happens with this understanding is you get an insight. I'm sure you've said this a million times. You get an insight with it. Like you and I, we walk around and try to point people and say, look, there's the roller coaster. You know, it's available for you to take a ride. And then what happens with me, and probably with you and with myself, is I kind of know there's another level to reach. If my clients stick around with me and they're hearing something, they know there's a roller coaster. And then they're off in their life one day and they're like in the middle of the thing that upset them most, and they just all of a sudden experience this peace within the troubled thing that they came to me with.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're like, sometimes my people will come back and they say this thing happened to me and they don't even realize how big it was until we start discussing it and they see where they was. Just like what happened to me with the friends. While I was with those friends and I was feeling insecure, I thought, oh yeah, you didn't learn anything. Right. What is wrong with you? Right. And then the next day, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I lived there. So what's important to know is this understanding. Once you start getting a taste of it, just a little taste, it grows and grows and grows. And there's no words that can tell somebody the experience that is available for them to come to in their own, because we just are pointing people in this direction of what we've experienced and seen people experience. But sometimes it takes a few, 3 lessons, or sometimes it takes 1 lesson, or sometimes it takes people a year. You know, it took me a long time personally. I think I knew there was something here. I had that experience with a psychiatrist, and then it took me a year to really realize that there was nothing to fix. And every year since, I've seen more and more and more and evolved to a person that I don't really recognize myself as much, because I really did have some self-esteem stuff, and I really don't think there's anything to fix in me. And that's where I lived.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love how it just how you describe that for people, because I know a lot of my clients and people listening, I'm sure, always kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of insecurity around that. Am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? What is it? How do I get it? You know? And so just to be able to like, this is it, what you've been speaking to here, you know, and at the same time, it's just a tiny little corner of it. And it's such a weird thing. I know, you know, like as a person that points people toward this, as it is, I don't know, I don't even know how to even describe that, but I can tell just in how you talked about how we point them and the roller coaster and the experiences of them. It's like, we're just kind of pointing towards something that's really tough to talk about in words, but somehow you're with someone, the feeling comes across, you're just sharing stories just like you are here, and people walk away with a little bit of a feel for it. And then, like you said, that feeling deepens. Often the more you talk, sometimes not. Sometimes sometimes the feeling deepens when you just go off and live your life for a while. So it's a really cool thing. It's really, really cool. But I'm so glad that you could share these stories. I think they're so human, just so normal. Like, you know, again, I was really, really moved by your talk at the conference and just how far you would come. And I kept thinking, for every person that says, yeah, but, you know, oh yeah, but you don't know my problems, I thought, well, she's living with cancer and she has a normal life with a husband and kids and all kinds of other things, you know, like, and somehow she's doing okay. Again, not that you don't get caught up. Like, we're not talking about being in constant bliss, but just being a real living example of what's possible in this. So I don't know. So I'm really happy that we can have this conversation and hear some of those stories. And hopefully it is just for everyone, you know, who might be listening to this. If there's something, like, who knows what the heck we even talked about? We just pointed to something. But if you kind of get a feel for what we're talking about here, you know, what Wendy's saying in terms of that, you know, we don't have to dig into it. And then it's like the less we look, the more it kind of clears up. Just stick with that. You know, that's the kind of little inkling that does tend to just fester and unfold in a really cool way.
Yeah. And like I said in the beginning, if it's just, don't write that email because you're going to feel different in the morning. When you start seeing yourself feel different in the morning and you don't react, you just you can't like stop it. You can't stop yourself from seeing it once you see a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. And the one other thing I would add is that I don't know how I'd live with cancer without this understanding. I would be I already experienced myself as it. It would be, I wouldn't be able to live my life. I mean, I keep having to go get scans. I keep getting new things happen, or new possibilities, new drugs, new doctors being jerks to me or not, new pains. And I know some people have great attitudes and have cancer. I didn't. I was 100% of a victim to my thinking in the moment and cancer. And I don't know how I would live my life without having this understanding. I think it would be terrible. It was terrible. Well, but just to say that this is an understanding that it's not new. It's not like Sid Banks just pointed out something about the way life works that it already was. It already is. It's not like, oh, we're selling you this great thing that's so totally new. It's just the way that life works. And when we see the way that life works, life becomes easier. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. And can you tell people you have a website now?
I do have a website. It's called Wake Up Your Wisdom, wakeupyourwisdom.com. And you also can reach me at Wendi Saggese, WendiSaggese.com.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. I'm so glad that you're here and that you're teaching this more and more now. I think so many people are gonna really resonate with what you said and know that you're kind of the, just a great example of this and a good teacher for them. So
thank you, and the feeling's mutual. And I love that book. If you guys don't already have that book, it's just a little orange book. I have it. I get things on my Kindle, but I looked at that book in the bookstore and I just had to have it. I had to hold it. And I knew you, but I wasn't shopping for your book at the moment. And I am so happy with that book. I love the cover. I just love everything about that book.
Well, I was so happy when you Facebook messaged me and said that you saw it in a bookstore, because I think it was right after it came out. I hadn't seen it in any bookstores yet, so I thought that was pretty awesome. So good. I'm glad you like it. Thank you.
Yeah, after reading that, I thought about how practical I am as a person, and these principles can be spiritual, and they are. Yeah. But I said, oh, you know what? I want to change my name from Wake Up Your Wisdom to Practical Principles or Practical something. Well, that was all taken, but I love how practical that book is. It's just real simple. You have a habit, it's a thought, and you could see it differently. I
think that's so important. And everything you shared today is very practical. They're just everyday examples of things, and that's where I think the meat of this really is. Because it is a spiritual understanding, and it is very deep and profound in some senses. But if we're going to share this with the world, as we're trying to do, and lots of people are trying to do, we got to just be down to earth and normal about it. There's not a huge market for people wanting this spiritual understanding, but something very simple and practical that seriously makes your life way, way better. I think there's a market for that. So hopefully that's where we're looking. Awesome. Well, thank you. And if everyone's interested, please check out Wendi. Thank you so much.